Hi everybody, I'm Pia from Stitches and Scraps. Today I'm going to show you how to make the linen puffs washcloth. This video goes along with a full written pattern which includes a chart. I'll be referencing the chart in the video. You can find a link to the pattern and the chart in the description on this video if you're watching it on YouTube, or in the blog post if you're watching this directly on my blog. You can see on the chart that I've highlighted in green certain rounds. These are the rounds that are worked in color B. In the actual pattern, color A, the symbols are in black, and color B, the symbols are in blue, but I only have a black and white printer, so everything came out black. Highlighting it helps me to see which rounds are supposed to be in which color. And that's a trick you can use also if you are working with a pattern in multiple colors and you only have a black and white printer. Just go ahead and highlight what should be in a different color. I'll be using Drops Paris yarn, which I did originally receive free for a different pattern. I don't have any more of the red color that I used in my actual washcloth, so for the tutorial I'll be using this gold color along with the off-white. Let's get started right here at the center with round 1, which is a main color or color A round. This symbol right here at the center can be either a magic circle or can be a chain. So you can either start by making a magic circle and chaining 1, or you can start by chaining 2 and then work all your stitches into the second chain from the hook. And that's the version I'm going to do. So once we've got our circle started, we're going to work puff stitch, chain 1, puff stitch, chain 1, puff stitch, chain 1, puff stitch, chain 1, all in that same circle or chain, and then join with a slip stitch. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, I don't use a slip knot when I start my work. I just make a twisted loop and put it on my hook. So this first chain is going to work a lot like a magic circle anyway. I'm going to yarn over and pull through for my first chain and then for my second chain. Now, let's do our puff stitches. The puff stitch starts with a yarn over, and then you insert your hook in the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, just like you're making a half double crochet. But now we're going to do that 2 more times in the same place. So yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over and pull up a loop. Yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over and pull up a loop. Now I have 7 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 7, and for this pattern I'm going to close that with a chain 1. That's not always the case, but for this pattern it is. Now I need another chain 1 for my corner. This chain 1 is part of the puff stitch, so when I say another chain 1, that comes after that one. Okay, and then let's do another puff stitch. Yarn over, insert your hook, pull up a loop 3 times. There's 2, there's 3. Yarn over and pull through all 7 loops, chain 1, and then chain 1 for the corner, and I'm going to do this 2 more times. So there's 1, 2, 3, yarn over and pull through all 7, chain 1 to close, chain 1 for the corner. 1 more, yarn over, pull up a loop, 1, 2, 3 times, yarn over, pull through all 7, chain 1 to close, and chain 1 for our last corner. And I'm going to tighten up my second chain there. So there's the end of the round, and now I just need to join to the beginning. Look closely at this puff stitch. This V stitch right here, that's what would have been the top of the puff if we didn't do a closing chain 1. And you can see how that's sort of on the side. That's why we're doing the closing chain 1, which is this loop right here on the top. So that's where we're going to join so that our puff stitches stay completely upright. Oops. So I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch in this chain right at the top of our puff stitch. And that is the end of round 1. Let's move on to round 2. For round 2, and actually for all of the rounds other than the edging, we're going to start by slip stitching into the corner chain space. And when we do that, we're going to slip stitch with our new color so that we're all set up with a color change ready to work the next round. So we slip stitch with our off-white, our color B, into this chain space, and then we chain 1, And in every one of these corner chain spaces, I'm going to work a single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. And then to get to the next space, to cross over that puff stitch, I'm going to work a chain 1. And then in the next space again, single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. So let's do that all the way around. First, I'm going to grab my color B and I'm going to slip stitch into this first chain space. Now I'm just letting my color A, oops, that's my tail. I'm just letting my color A go. It's going to sit at the back there, and I'm going to slip stitch into this chain space with the new color. And my stitch is a little floppy, so I can pull on my color A to tighten it up. Okay. Now, for the corner, because we're in that corner chain space, we're going to chain 1 to get our round started, and then in the corner we're going to do a single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. To get to the next corner, to cross over this puff, we're going to do a chain 1. And then in the next corner, single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. So chain 1 to get to the next space, and then single crochet, chain 2, single crochet in the chain space. Chain 1 to get to our last chain space, single crochet, chain 2, single crochet in that last chain space, and finally chain 1 to get across that last puff. And then we join with a slip stitch in the first stitch of our round. And that is round 2. Let's take a look at round 3. Round 3, we're going to start the same way. We're going to slip stitch into the corner space and chain 1 to get up to the height of our round, all while changing colors into our main color. And then we're in our corners, we're going to work a puff, chain 1, puff. Okay, that's going to be every corner. In the middle here, we're going to skip over those single crochets and we're going to work puff stitches down into the puff stitch below the chain space. So 2 rows below, this is 1 row below, this is 2 rows below. We're going to work into that puff stitch. When we do that, we're going to work over the chain space, sort of encapsulating it so that it's inside our stitch and hidden. So we're going to work over the chain space and into that puff stitch below. And we're going to do that for each of the sides. So let's do that all the way around. Start by changing color. Now my color A is still sitting at the back here, so I just detangle it from the tails, and I can slip stitch right into this chain 2 space with color A. And then I tighten up my last slip stitch of color B, and I'm ready to start the round. So chain 1 to get up to the height. And in the corners, I'm just going to work puff stitch, 1, 2, 3, chain 1 to close the puff stitch, chain 1 for the corner, and another puff stitch, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and don't forget the chain 1 to close that puff stitch. Now here, this is the fun part. Over this chain 1 space, I'm going to work around the chain 1 space and into this puff stitch below it. So there's my chain 1 at the top of the puff, right there. I'm going to insert my hook into the top of that puff stitch all the way through to the back so that this yarn wraps over that chain space, and pull up a loop. Now wiggle it so that it gets to the height of your row so you don't have a tight or tiny puff stitch. And do it again. Yarn over, insert your hook, pull up a loop. Yarn over, insert your hook, pull up a loop. Now when I close this puff stitch, you'll see that that chain space in between has completely disappeared. And that's what we want. We want the puffs to be connected with the chain space hidden inside them. And now we're at another corner. So that is puff stitch, chain 1, puff stitch. And remember not to forget your closing chain 1 on the puff stitches. And in the middle here, we're going down into that puff stitch below to do another puff stitch. Chain 1 to close, and we get to our corner, and we know how to do the corner. It's 2 puff stitches with a chain 1 between them. And then we keep doing that all the way around. I'm going to do these last few and come back to you at the end. Okay, I'm on this last puff stitch here, and I'm working into the round below. Oops. Pull through, chain one to close. Now this little line that you see here, this is actually my starting tail. When I weave in ends, that's going to go away. Okay, so don't worry about that. I know that looks a little messy, but that will go away when you weave in your end. So now to join the round, I join again in the top of that very first puff stitch with a slip stitch, and that completes round 3. So let's move on to round 4. For round 4, we're again going to start by slip stitching into the chain 1 space in the corner and changing our colors. And then in each corner, just like with round 2, we're going to do a single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. But now we have more puff stitches before we get to the next corner. So what we're going to do, as we cross over each puff, we're still going to do a chain 1, just like we did down here in round 2. But then we're also going to do a single crochet between the puff stitches. So there isn't a chain space here, right? We're just going to put a single crochet in the gap between the puff stitches. So it goes single crochet, chain 2, single crochet in the corner, chain 1 to get over the puff stitch, single crochet in the gap between the stitches. And then you keep repeating that all the way till you get to the next corner. So what's the deal with this repeat box? Well, every time that we do a repeat of row 4, we add 2 stitches to each side. 1 stitch from this corner, 1 stitch from this corner, right? And every time we repeat round 5, we're going to be adding another stitch to each side as well. 1 stitch from this corner, 1 stitch from that corner. So that means we're adding 4 stitches to each side edge every time we repeat rows 4 and 5. Well, that means that we're going to work what's in this box 2 more times every time that we have another repeat. So right now on row 4, we're going to work what's in this box once. When we get to row 6, we'll be working this 3 times. When we get to row 8, we'll be working it 5 times, and so on and so forth. So this box just means basically keep repeating this until we get across to the other corner. Okay, and you'll see that box on each side because we're adding those stitches on each side of our work. So let's go ahead and work round 4. Once again, we're going to change colors with our slip stitch into the corner chain space and tighten up our current color and chain 1 to get up to the height of the row. Now in every corner, we do a single crochet, chain 2, single crochet, and then to get across, we're going to do a chain 1 across each of the puff stitches, and then in between the puff, you can see how there's a space in between there. It's not really a chain space, right? Because this chain is the top of that puff, but it is a space because for each puff, you've got these 2 V's. One was the pull through and one is the chain. So it does create a gap between them. And what you're going to do is you're going to work in that gap between them and make a single crochet, just like that. Okay, chain 1 to get over the puff, and again in this gap between puff stitches you're going to work a single crochet. Chain 1 to get over this next puff, and that brings us to the corner chain space. In the corner space we go single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. Chain 1 to get over the puff, single crochet between the puff, chain 1, single crochet. I think in the pattern I said before the next puff, but yeah, so before, in the space before this next puff, single crochet, chain 1 to get over the puff, and then we're in our chain space, which is single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. And I'll keep doing that all the way around and meet you back at the beginning of the round. Okay, I've done my last single crochet and my last chain 1 to get over that last puff, and I'm going to slip stitch in the first stitch to finish the round, and that is round 4. Let's take a look at round 5. Row 5 is very much like row 3. We're again going to start with a slip stitch in the corner. We're going to chain 1, and for every corner we're going to work puff stitch, chain 1, puff stitch in the corner. And just like for row 3, we're going to skip over those single crochets and we're going to work puff stitches into the puff stitches below the chain 1 spaces here. There's just more of them now. until we get across to the next corner. And again, this is that repeating section that we're going to do more times every time we repeat rows 4 and 5. So it's just puff stitch into every puff stitch below the chain 1 spaces, and then puff stitch, chain 1, puff stitch in the corners. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to drop our color B, pick up our color A, and slip stitch into the corner space, just like before. Okay? Now, in this corner, I'm going to chain 1 to get up to the height, and then I'm going to work puff stitch, 2, 3. Remember to do that chain 1 for the corner, and then puff stitch, 1, 2, 3, and chain 1 to close the puff stitch. I'm going to skip over this single crochet, and then in this next puff stitch, I'm going to work a puff stitch wrapping around that chain 1 space there. And then a puff stitch in the next puff stitch. And I'm going to do that in all of the puff stitches. So there's 3 of them here. So 1, 2, 3 for my puff stitch, yarn over and pull through, and chain 1. And then skip the single crochet, go into the next puff stitch, yarn over and pull through, chain 1. And that brings me to the corner. In the corner, we're going to do puff stitch, do the chain 1 to close it, chain 1 for the corner, and another puff stitch. I'm going to keep doing that pattern all the way around. We've seen this before. It's the same as round 3. It just has more of these puff stitches in between. Okay, I finished my last puff stitch for the round, and now I'm going to join in the top of the first puff stitch. And that is round 5. And now you're really starting to see the pattern that we're establishing here. Let's take a look at the later rounds. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, and round 5 right there. So as we keep going, you can see that what we're doing is we're still doing our corners the same way, the single crochet, chain 2, single crochet for round 4 repeats, and then the single crochets between the puff stitches. And you can see all those single crochets line up in straight lines, and every time we do it, there's just a couple more. Similarly with the puff stitches, we're doing puff stitch, chain 1, puff stitch in each corner, and we're working puff stitches into the rounds below wherever there's a puff stitch to get across between the corners. And you just keep doing that, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. One thing to notice is the pattern will naturally start to twist, and that is the nature of working in rounds all on the same side. I decided I kind of liked that twisty look for the washcloth, so I decided not to turn my rounds. You could, if you wanted it perfectly straight, you could work your puff stitch rounds from the wrong side. That would mean adjusting a little bit where you start and end the rounds. But I kind of like the twisty nature of this for a washcloth because it doesn't have to be perfectly straight. And you can just keep repeating rounds 4 and 5 as many times as it says in the pattern, or until you get the size that you want for your washcloth. The other thing I want to show you is this line right here that's formed from carrying the colors up. So this line will be on the back. You can avoid this line by cutting and rejoining a new piece of yarn every time you change colors, but that's going to leave you a lot of ends to weave in. So I didn't mind having this along the back. If you do, you can cut and rejoin your yarn every time that you change colors. Once you've finished all the repeats we're going to do, it's time to do the single crochet edging. The single crochet edging is done in the main color, so the color A, it's the same color as the previous row, so there's no color change to start it. And also, because it's the last round and we don't care where it ends up, we don't have to slip stitch into the corner. So you're just going to start right where you are and work a first single crochet into that first puff stitch. Now every corner we're going to work 3 single crochet in the corner. As we go along the sides, we're going to work the single crochets between the puff stitches like before, but we're also going to work a single crochet in the top of each puff stitch. So it's single crochet in the puff, single crochet between the puff, single crochet in the puff, and then between the puff, and so on, all the way around for the edging. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So I'm starting with this puff right before the corner space, and I'm just going to chain 1 and single crochet right into that first puff stitch to start my round. Now in the corner space, I do 3 single crochets. There's no space anymore, it's just 3 single crochets. Then I single crochet into this puff, and now between the puff stitch and into the puff stitch, I'm going to single crochet between the puffs, single crochet into the puff. So notice that after the corner, there's not another single crochet before this puff stitch. After you do the 3 in the corner, your next stitch is into this puff stitch, and then you start going between the stitch and in the stitch, between the stitch and in the stitch. So there's my single crochet in that puff. Here's one before the next puff, and then a single crochet in that puff, and then another one before the next puff, and so on until I get to the corner. So there's a single crochet before that last puff, and then a single crochet in the puff, and now I'm at the corner. So in the corner, it's 3 single crochet, and I'll do one more side with you. Single crochet in the puff immediately after the corner, and then between the puffs, so before the next puff, in the next puff, 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 and then we get back to the corner. So I'll finish doing that all the way around. Okay, I'm coming to my last few stitches here. I go before this puff, in this puff, before the next puff, and now remember I started my round in that first puff already. So I've already worked a stitch in that puff, and I just join. And then you can fasten off, and actually let me show you an invisible join to make that little seam there go away. So you can join with a slip stitch and then just fasten off, but instead I'm going to show you an alternative. So let's cut both of our yarns. Okay, and then go ahead and fasten off this stitch without joining. Now to join, I'm just going to kind of mimic this shape here. See how it comes out of the previous stitch? Let me zoom in a bit. See how each of these V's comes out of the previous stitch in the center, goes underneath both legs of the next stitch, and then goes back down into the center? Well, here we have this tail coming out of the previous stitch in the center, so let's bring it underneath both legs of this stitch. You can go in either direction, okay? Underneath both legs of that stitch, and then back down in the center of this one. And then you can weave in your end, and you've got a nice seamless join there that's hardly noticeable. And that's how you make the linen puff washcloth. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, share it with your friends, or leave me a comment. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel for more great videos. Thanks for watching.